Hello and welcome to the SimTech podcast, the show where we explore the latest innovations, techniques and insights in the world of clinical simulation. I'm your host Craig, and today we've got an exciting episode lined up for you. Simulation technology is evolving rapidly, and one of the most fascinating advancements is the use of AI in clinical training. That's why I'm thrilled to be joined by Will, the co-founder of SimConverse, an AI-powered platform that replicates patient interactions to help clinicians enhance their communications and decision-making skills. In this episode, we'll dive into SimConverse and how it works, the inspiration behind it, and the impact on healthcare education. Will and I will also discuss how simulation professionals can incorporate AI into their training programs and what the future holds for this cutting-edge technology. Whether you're a seasoned simulation technician or just starting out in the field, this conversation is packed with insights you won't want to miss. So, let's jump in. Welcome to another episode of the SimTech podcast. Today, we will be delving into the world of AI. And to help me with that journey of the unknown, I brought along a guest. Will, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. Hi, Craig. So my name's Will. I'm the COO and co-founder of SimConverse. My background is medical. So I started the company with Aidan, who's my co-founder, during my MD, PhD at the University of Sydney. I can go into a bit more detail there if it's helpful. And my kind of background proximal to that is my academic career focuses very much on communication theories and looking at ways in which we can increase access to communication skills training. So that's my bread and butter. It's the things that I'm very passionate about and love talking about and love coming on podcasts and giving my 2 cents where it's helpful.
Do you do, or have you done any clinical simulation?
Yes, we do. We do lots of clinical simulation. So we work from early level professionals through to practicing. So year one of a program, or even sometimes prior to a degree starting, we do the communication training component of the learner journey. If what you were asking me was, did I work clinical? Then no, we actually founded this. We did the Silicon Valley story almost, where we started this during our second year. A few mates asked us if they could start using it for some of their OSCE preparation. So we said, okay, sure. And then that picked up a bit. The universities in the area, we went out and started chatting to them, and they got wind of what we were doing, and that kind of put a bit more wind in the sails. And then from there, really the ship sort of took off for us. So we very much were intending to finish our medical degrees, but by the start of our third year, things got very, very hectic for the life of SimConverse. So we decided to take first of all, the plan was, this was like 5 years ago now, but first of all, a little over 5 years ago now, but the plan was to take off a year from the MD, and in my case, MD, PhD, and then come back to it at the end of the year. After seeing how SimConverse went for their first year. By the end of year one, we'd signed our first 2 NHS contracts. So we're like, okay, we'll see if we can do another year. USyd was kind enough to let us do another year. And at the end of that year, we were already in 7 different countries and being used every day by hundreds of different learners. Now it's thousands, but at the time that was huge for us as well. So that's kind of the trajectory that brought us down this, or led us down this garden path, so to speak.
Okay, so what is SimConverse? And if you was going to explain it very briefly, in a couple of paragraphs, how would you explain it to an alien?
Yeah, sure. So SimConverse does communication skills training at large scale. The way that we deliver that is we use a suite of purpose-built generative AI models. So we build everything that we use in-house. That's really important for a few reasons in communication. Helps with standardization. It helps with control for educators and staff too. So you basically know how this thing is going to behave for you, rather than the big concern with generative AI, which is if you use general purpose models, they just like hallucinate and make up information. So we don't have those issues because we build everything from scratch. Very hard to do, but it allows you to have some very nuanced and sometimes very difficult conversations on the platform. To give people kind of sorry, go for it, Craig.
No, so if I'm reading this right, it allows a person to talk to an application who is on the surface AI, but actually, if you dig a little bit more into it, we've kind of programmed this AI model ourselves. So they're not just making this information up that they get back in turn.
Yeah, the easiest way to understand it is you've kind of got two different sets of AI models doing some work for you. One is playing the role of an actor. The other is playing the role of like an educator assistant. So the actor takes in the same kind of instructions that you might give to, a person in real life if you wanted them to play the role of someone, and then it will play that role for you. The educator assistant will take the instructions that you would tell someone to mark your rubrics. Like you would say, this is how I want you to mark it. And then they go ahead and they do the marking of the rubric for you.
Yeah. So, I mean, probably in the most common model that most people will know is ChatGPT. Is that the kind of thing that we're thinking about?
So ChatGPT it's based on generative intelligence. So generative technology is what we use. We don't use ChatGPT very intentionally. There's a bunch of issues with that in education. The two key ones I actually kind of referenced very briefly earlier, which is hallucination and non-standardization. So we can't really work with those models as educators because what they end up doing, first of all, they're not actually built for what we want to use them for. They're built to try and be very general purpose. The G in GPT stands for generative, the P stands for pre-trained, and the T stands for transformer. They then pre-train their models, which is the P here, on the Internet of Language so that they can try and get it to do basically everything for them. Now, what that means is it's okay at answering a whole bunch of different questions. It's okay at doing a bunch of different things for you, but it's not very good at really anything in particular. In education, we need specialized models that are very good at doing the things that we need them to do. So in our case, where we kind of come in is that when you talk to the SimConverse platform, so you might be talking to a patient, a family member, or a colleague, and immediately getting a huge amount of feedback after that interaction based on whatever curriculum that you're in. Everything that you go through feels like you're kind of just talking to one person and you get a bunch of feedback. But depending on the complexity of the scenario, there can be anywhere between 6 and 8 different models that you're actually talking to at any one point in time, because each of those models will be hyper specialized on a specific part of that conversation. So just to give an example, and I'll round that thought out for you. An example would be if I talk to my device, the device needs to hear what I have said and then transcribe that into text. That's one model. We actually built that transcription model ourselves. We had to because we work in a very multicultural environment and also low quality microphones in ward environments as well sometimes. It's not just people at home on their laptops. It might be people in the wards on their phones, that sort of stuff. So we need to build transcription. That's one model. And at the same time that that's working, all of the other models around comprehension, speech generation, providing feedback, paraverbal communication, so tonality, speech pattern, inflection, that sort of stuff, all of those need to be happening as well. So feels nice and simple, which is kind of it's the end objective, but it is a much more complicated pipeline under the hood, which is the key thing for anyone who doesn't really care about the technology side. The key thing there is that it gives you control. And that's really what we need in education is control and consistency.
Yeah, you see that all the time in simulation as well. We have to control the learning objectives, otherwise, things can just get out of a bit out of control. So, especially with AI, you might need to actually have extra control, because am I right thinking that you're responsible for what they might say? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so there's so I'll kind of go through a couple distinctions because I think the audience might find it just generally interesting. So the concerns with generative intelligence, so specifically the concerns I'm talking about are hallucination, which is for those of the audience who don't really know what hallucination means in the AI context, is where information is made up. So the reason that happens There's a couple of reasons, but the way that I like to basically describe it is, I mentioned before what GPT stands for. It's actually a really good explanation here, is the way that the actual naming works. The generative is basically, what does this technology do? It generates a response for you based on its understanding of the language. And then the T is the transformer. Now, the transformer is that's basically like just a unit of code. It's a little bit more complicated than that. It's basically a unit of code that lets you do the generation that we were talking about. The middle letter, so the P, so GPT, the P stands for pre-trained. And I referenced just before what that is pre-trained on, which is the Internet of Language, to basically work out, how do I speak to someone? There are two big issues with training your models on the Internet of Language when we think about using it in the context of education. And both of them relate to the exact same thing. So I'm basically talking about the physics of the models here for people who are interested. The Internet is two things. It is huge, and it's also very bigoted. So when you train your AI models on the internet and you basically teach it that worldview or world model, you then have two key problems. If I present it with a huge amount of information, how does it know what's important? So how does it know what's kind of good behavior, but also how does it know what's real? So the answer is it doesn't. And when you ask it questions that, for example, I need this like journal list or journal article list, it will hallucinate and make up references for you. Now, it's not doing that maliciously. It's just guessing. So that's one of the issues, is when you present it with this huge amount of data, how does it actually break that down and synthesize it? The answer is it not like reasonably well, but not to the level of fidelity that we need in education. The other component, which is a little bit more insidious if you don't have some stops and controls on this, is if you train your models on the Internet of Language. The internet, when we talk about things like gender affirming care, cultural and linguistic diversity, tends to be quite disgusting, depending on what part of the internet that you're in. So if you train your models on that information, I can guarantee you that the behavior is going to mimic the source. Now, what you then need to try and do is sort of fight that source, right? So you put layers on top of it that try and combat some of the things that it was pre-trained on. So that's called post-training. Now, that process is nowhere near as effective as if you were to build the model for a specific purpose using the same kinds of technology, so still generative and still transformers, but you're building a different model based on different pre-training. So that's what we do. Now, the pre-training that we do is based on years worth of clinical communication. Now, hundreds of thousands of different transcripts and discussions have taken place on the platform. So all of this comes to a head at, you get the benefits of generative, you get the benefits of this sort of artificial intelligence, but you also don't get the negatives of some of those things that people have seen with the early days of ChatGPT, where it just makes up things, that has really weird biases, that sort of stuff. If you don't ever teach it that stuff is how it should be behaving, it won't know that that's how it should behave. So it's kind of like if you had like a blank slate person that didn't have any sort of understanding of the world, and you give it that understanding of the world, if you only show them good things, they'll only know good things. If that makes sense.
It does. What I'm thinking about is what happens, because there's a space for that, isn't there? For that, what I'm going to call filler. For what happens when somebody asks something that's not programmed in there already. It's got to get the information from somewhere. For instance, if you put only a certain amount of clinical prompts in there, and then it gets asked, how do you like your eggs in the morning? We haven't programmed it from that, so it's got to fill it from somewhere, and that's where it just might make stuff up. Is that what we're thinking?
Yeah. So the filling, so when you kind of call it like going off piste on a conversation, so it really depends on the character that you've set up. So it actually depends on the information that you provide it with. And I'll give you, so because the way that we've trained our models is effectively like the first section that you interact with is playing the role of the person, so patient, colleague, family member. It's basically been taught how to play a prompt or a role very, very well. Now, what that means is if you want to give it really specific detail in that role, that's fine. So you give it that detail and it will standardize to that information. Now, what happens if I don't provide it with that information from the outset? It will play the role. So what I mean by that is maybe my role is someone who's really angry with me and they only want me to find out, or they only want me to provide information that actually helps with whatever their chief concern is. So someone who's I need to de-escalate them, and then they're in a hospital or clinical environment. Actually, we've got a clip for that in a minute. Someone like that. So if I tried to talk to them about the soccer score on the weekend, they'd probably tell me to go away and that they wanted to focus on their father's care. Right. So they're playing the role. Like an actor would. Again, same sort of thing. The other end of that spectrum is if I'm in a community setting, for example, and someone is quite socially isolated, maybe they want to have a really long form conversation with me, and they're happy to go off piste and just chat about random things. That's another thing that you can set up. So we'll be able to have those discussions, but it's all about playing the role. Now, the kind of, I guess, a logical next question there is, can I have conversations with it about the Manchester United game on the weekend? And the answer to that is no, not unless you put that detail into the prompt, because it's not, these things are connected to the internet intentionally. So, but it's all about that role. So you give it more detail if you want to, or you have it play a slightly different personality, can be flexible, can also be reasonably rigid. Those are sort of, those two examples I just gave are either end of a spectrum, if that helps.
Yeah, and like you say, it does feel like it's controlled, because I could only imagine how wild something like ChatGPT might be. I assume you've tested this and you've had maybe a little bit of a giggle listening to maybe its responses and where it goes.
Yeah, like I think most, like many people at this point who are interested in the AI space have gone ahead and actually tried something similar. I know a lot of people in our space, so people providing kind of this sort of training in our space, have tried to like import it into different products and platforms and things, and unsurprisingly, you get the results that we were talking about earlier, which is it's not consistent. It's also actually very, very slow. So you can't use it in back to forth clinical communication, because you need rapid, nice and quick responses from people. Otherwise, you lose any kind of fidelity.
Yeah, exactly. All right, as you said, we're going to have a little listen to your demonstration. Would you like to introduce the clip that we're about to play?
Yeah, sure. So this clip is from a demonstration video I recorded earlier in the year. This is me having a de-escalation conversation with Joe Natoldi. He's come in to the hospital. His father has been admitted. His father has dementia, and I believe he came in for a fall. And as a learner going into this scenario, your responsibility is effectively to de-escalate Joe by giving him as much information as you can within reason, but also making sure that you hear out his concerns. Kind of general good practice de-escalation techniques. This particular one was built out using the 2E framework of de-escalation, but there's no reason that you have to use the platform that way. So I hope you enjoy.
Let's have a little listen.
Hi Joe, my name's Dr. Will. I understand you have some concerns today. I'm here to help address those as best I can for you. I was wondering, where would you like me to start?
What the hell is going on with my mother? Why was she admitted to the hospital? And why is she all confused and not making sense? Did you guys do something to her?
Okay, Joe, so I'm very happy to help answer these questions. That's what I'm here to do. First of all, what have you actually been told so far? And we can maybe use that as the starting point.
I got a message from the hospital saying my mother had been admitted, but I don't know why. And she's confused and not making sense. I think you guys did something to her.
Okay, Joe, so I will start from the beginning. I'll explain as much as I can, and I'm going to check in regularly to make sure that we're both on the same page. So first of all, your mother had a fall at home, and an emergency bracelet went off because she had that fall. Were you aware of that?
No, I wasn't aware of that. I'm sorry, I wasn't at home. But why did she fall? Did she break anything?
Okay, Joe, so we had the same kind of concern when your mother came in. I can tell you that we did give her a hip x-ray and we found that she doesn't have any fractures. She does have some bruising around the area though, but she doesn't have any fractures, which is definitely a good thing. As to why she fell, we believe that the reason was she's feeling quite confused and delirious at the moment. Have you spoken to your mother at all over the last day or so?
No, I haven't spoken to her. I just got the message from the hospital. But why is she confused and delirious? Did you guys do something to her?
Okay, Joe. So when your mother came in, she was feeling that confusion and delirium already. And we think that might have actually been the reason for the fall. So when your mother came in, because she had that confusion and delirium, what we went ahead and did was a thing called a urinalysis, where we sample your mother's urine to test for bacteria. And what we found was she has what's called a severe urinary tract infection, or a UTI, sometimes people abbreviate it as. Is that making sense so far? Can I clarify anything else there?
What the hell is a urinary tract infection? Why would that cause confusion and delirium? And why would my mother call an ambulance for that?
Okay, Joe. So a urinary tract infection is where bacteria have gotten into your mother's waterworks. Sometimes it can go all the way up into her bladder. In your mother's case, we think it might just be localized to the urethra, which is a part of your mother's nether region. Now, the relevance to all of this to you is that in elderly people, in elderly individuals, sometimes a urinary tract infection can cause delirium and confusion when it gets into their bloodstream.
I don't understand. Why would a urinary tract infection cause confusion and delirium? And why would my mother call an ambulance for that?
Okay, Joe. So I'm happy to keep clarifying for you. Now, and I'll do a better job of explaining to you as well. So in terms of the ambulance, so your mother didn't actually call the ambulance. It was called because of her emergency bracelet that went off. Now, are you connected to the emergency bracelet?
No, I'm not. I didn't know she had an emergency bracelet. Why didn't you call me?
All right. Wow. Will, the first thing that really strikes me with that is how quick the responses are. Are the responses already predetermined? So have they already thought of the answers, or are they completely original and you'll get different answers each time you ask the same question?
Yeah, so that's a very important question. It gives me kind of a good jumping off point. So also too, like that latency and the speed at which you get responses is very important. It's also very, very hard to achieve. So it's always good hearing that. The way in which the platform is responding to you is it's looking at that prompt that we will have provided it with at the character creation screen. It's looking at that and saying, how can I give you a response that aligns with this role? And then from there, it will give you a conceptually standardized answer. Now, what I mean by that is it's not linguistic standardization. So linguistic standardization is if I had to write out every single question and every single answer that I could possibly think of, and then get my learner to go through. Now, anyone who's tried that, which actually is a surprisingly high number, will know that that just doesn't work. You get really rigid and weird conversations if you ask it something in a slightly different phraseology, but it's still about the same concept. What you need is you need to approach it from the conceptual standardization route. And I'll give you an example of what this means. So if I was to give you a role of, if I was to tell you that you're playing Joe Natoli, I would tell you that your name is Joe Natoli. Now that's a concept. Your name is Joe Natoli, right? I might ask you that question in a bunch of different ways, like what is your name? Could you let me know what your first name is and last name is? And that sort of stuff. So I might ask the question in a whole heap of different ways. It's about the same concept. And you might give that information to me in a bunch of different ways, depending on your personality. Okay? But the concept is standardized. The language will be role specific, but the concept is standardized, which means that when we talk about, think of it as basically the same way that we interpret the information, the AI takes that and then we'll have a similar sort of interpretation. It's not exact, but it's not exactly the same way that we work as far as our neuroscience is concerned, but it's very similar. So when we talk about actually applying this in learning, you don't have to have thought of every single question that a learner could ask. You just need to know what the role is that you want that person to play. So you don't need to sit down and spend many, many hours thinking, okay, what are all the questions they might do as an intro? what all the questions they might do is present a complaint. All you need to say is, all right, who is this person? What is the background that's relevant? And then from there, they'll standardize to those concepts that you put into the prompt, which, by the way, the prompt itself, people who are familiar with generative AI will know, but I'll just explain what I mean. It's a text field where you give the background of what the character is and who the person is that they're playing today. Now, we have a very specific structure on the SimConverse platform. It's really easy and very intuitive to sort of hop in there and just build things from scratch. But it is a specific structure, which allows you to have the standardization that I was talking about before. So that's it's called conceptual standardization rather than linguistic, if that makes sense, Craig.
Yeah, would a non-tech be able to maybe go on there and play around with generating their own characters? Is it that easy?
Yeah, it's actually built for non-tech. So everyone should be able to not just hop in and use the platform as a learner, but they should also be able to hop in if they were an educator and use it and build these things from scratch themselves. Now, the first maybe 1 or 2 scenarios, you want to get your bearings and stuff, so that might take you a couple hours to do. But once you're talking about using any of our thousands of different scenarios that exist on our open library, you basically just take those and chop and change minor details, and you're honestly good to go in 5 to 10 minutes. We have hundreds of different accreditation aligned curricula in the UK context. It's like GMC, NMC, GPHC, HCPC, you name it. It's very likely that a UK HEI has already built out curricula that we use in our libraries.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, one of the critiques of what I just listened to there would be they sound a little bit robotic. You can almost tell that the voice coming back is AI. Is there any look into the future to make them sound more human? Or is that one step too far, maybe?
No, actually, we've already done it. So the reason I mentioned at the start that was a video I filmed earlier in the year is because I don't like Joe's voice. We actually, as of September this year, we launched just over 100 voices into the platform, which all, as far as the listener is concerned, they'll sound about the same quality, if not better than what they're listening to on the podcast at the moment. So very high quality, includes things like tonality and sort of emotion, affect, that sort of stuff. And that also once we built that, gave us the ability to actually build new voices. So if someone has a weird and wacky or wonderful idea, it's actually reasonably easy now for us to work with teams to build entirely new accents as well. So kind of unlocked a really interesting future with that.
All right. What do you think some of the main advantage of using something like this rather than maybe a traditional simulation session?
Scale. So the technology in general is only really useful to increase scale of whatever it is you're doing. The people I think get really excited by technology, but then you see what happens with some of the recent hardware, like the earlier versions and recent versions of like some of the VR type technologies, where there's this nice saying that I think frames it up really nicely, which is try, oh my, goodbye, which is you try this thing and you're like, oh my, this is really good. And then you put it down, you don't use it again. Now, the reason that happens with any technology, not to diss anyone in particular, but the reason that happens with any technology is if you're not solving for scale, because that's what technology helps you do. Now, what I mean by scale is doing more training, reaching more learners for less or the same work that educators would be doing now. So basically higher leverage for the organization. Now, for comparison to like existing simulation, it gives you an opportunity to basically take some of the stuff that you might be doing in person that might be really arduous to get through your entire workforce and transferring some of that to be online, as well as unlocking a whole heap of training that you can be adding in for your learners as well. So I had a conversation earlier, well, it's this evening my time, but I know it's morning for you. So I had a conversation earlier this evening with a group looking at training around their organizational culture. So this is I won't mention who it is, but this is a high-level organization in the UK looking at the culture of their workforce. And what they're most interested in is basically being able to say all of our workforce have had some kind of reports around their culture or some issues around culture in recent publications and media. So what we need to do is give them an opportunity to do more training in the space that is active and provides effective feedback. Now, that's scaling up active learning, scaling up behavioral skills training, and scaling up feedback. That's kind of why we exist. That's what this technology is really helpful for. That's the, at least in my opinion, and I'm very biased, that's one of the best applications of generative AI, I think, is anything related to language and communication when applied effectively. That's what it's good at.
So this isn't just a clinical thing. This could be used for, I don't know, HR or, any kind of department that, you want to have a conversation with.
Yeah, so we're used both clinically and non-clinically. We're used across multiple different. We tend to focus on healthcare because that's our health disciplines because that's our professional expertise. But that doesn't stop organisations from taking us and using it in a whole bunch of different settings. So business schools, like you mentioned, HR departments, leadership teams, a whole stretch of different things. Think effectively. If I need to train a learner on having an interpersonal conversation with somebody else, then you can use the platform to achieve that. Now, that's a pretty broad thing for me to say. So I would suggest that anyone who is listening to that and is interested, that they have a look into kind of what we do, because the proof is in the pudding, which is really awesome to be able to say.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, my brain's already ticking because although you're saying it's used for conversations and communication, could we, for instance, turn it into an instructor in something? So it could almost teach somebody a skill. I'm not so much like teach somebody how to play the guitar, but it could teach someone, the theory on guitar, couldn't it? It's stuff like that.
Yeah, the challenge with that is that you'd have a pretty big prompt around the teaching and things, because you want to give it all of the information so that it basically plays the role appropriately for you. But you can use technology like this to do that. I haven't seen that exact example on the platform yet, but I'll let you know when I do.
Yeah. I mean, have you thought about maybe putting this inside like a simulator? I mean, is that even possible?
Yeah, so I do actually already see some. Our big benefit is that scale piece. So the biggest benefit is being able to help deliver hundreds, if not thousands, of hours asynchronously, so that you don't have to have a whole bunch of in-person physical resources and educators there, and also saves the educators a heap of time when they go through as well with these larger cohorts. But I have actually already seen in the organisations that use us for all of that asynchronous stuff, they also tend to bring us sometimes into the simulation labs. So the difficulty there is that you've obviously got to then have a microphone set up near the bed and a speaker, depending on like your laptop quality. But I already see that. So University of Technology of Sydney here, they use us in that way. University of Liverpool over there in the UK, and they used us in that way very early on as well. So it's an interesting use case. I don't think necessarily it's the best application of technology like this, but it solves problems for them, which is always really cool to see. One thing that I absolutely love is just all of the different wacky and very interesting ideas that people have for using the platform, because we've built it the way that we have. Like I still regularly see people using it in new ways that we haven't thought of. Like we had. I was there at the start of the year in the UK for a few weeks, actually a couple of months, and I spoke to the University of Essex team, and Matt Osborne, shout out Matt Osborne, he's excellent. But he was telling me that they started using the platform for debriefing of the students after the exercises. So they went ahead and they actually set them up as debriefing AI. That was really cool. Now, I wouldn't suggest people just jump in and go for broke doing that. Matt's basically an expert in this at this point because we've been working with him for so long. But that was Aidan and I hadn't even thought of it. Neither the rest of our team. So that was a really cool one. I love seeing that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, aren't we all just made up of our own prompts? That's all we are? Eventually, if we can just put our own prompts into this, we just replace themselves.
That's a terrifying thought.
Yeah, is SimConverse, is it an app, or can you get through it on the browser?
It's a browser-based application, so you can log in. You can access this from any device. You don't have to download anything. You can do Google Chrome, Edge, Safari, whatever. So very, very accessible. That was something that was super important to us. For the HEIs who are listening, we also typically integrate directly into the technologies that they currently use, so learning management systems, or VLEs, that I know you guys refer to it as locally. We actually integrate directly so that you can do and automate a heap of the learning around that clinical exercise. So take something that would have taken you many hours in addition to the actual teaching of basically working out who did what, how well did they do. Now I'm going to upload it into my Canvas, Blackboard, Moodle, whatever. Now the platform does it for you. So there's a lot of saved time there. And that's the feedback that we get, is that it really helps the educators actually deliver this stuff at large scale and reduces a whole bunch of the stuff they just really hated doing, and get to focus a little bit more on supporting the learners in the way that they want, rather than doing a whole bunch of the admin work around it.
Yeah, exactly. So, the instructor doesn't have to be there. It can be something that the learner does in their own time from their bedroom. They can just go through things, and then the instructor at a later date can jump on, see how well they did, how well it was scored, that kind of stuff.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Brill. All right. So what's next for SimConverse, and what's in the future?
Yeah, so the most valuable commodity that we have is focus. Our laser focus is on communication and scaling that up. When I say communication, I'm also including for the audience things like clinical reasoning and exercises around what discussions take place. So there's a lot of stuff that needs to happen around a conversation that we also handle. But that's our focus, is building that out, supporting that more. So we have a library of thousands. We're going to continue building that as quickly and as broadly as we can, so that we can just reach more and more people. We are already multilingual, but we're going to continue adding languages over the course of 2025. We already are the only speech-to-text platform and speech-to-speech platform that has paraverbal communication, so tonality, speech pattern, inflection in real time. We're going to continue building that out over the course of 2025 too. It's already in there, but like to polish it up a little bit. I mentioned before the voices that we just launched, so that really helps us with the diversity on the platform. So people can sound completely different, they can look completely different depending on who you need to represent, because the visual anchor that we use is actually an AI-generated image. So there's sort of a lot of different stuff that we're already working on that's going to continue into the new year. The big thing over, I guess, focus area of mine is we have started doing a lot. In fact, most of our work in the UK and Europe. So I'm going to be over there quite a bit this year, meeting people who use the platform currently and meeting people who maybe from this podcast want to have a chat with me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, one last question before I hand it over to you for any final points, Will. It's the trickiest question and probably the most important for the listeners. How much does it cost?
Yeah, unfortunately, the answer is it depends. So I can give you some details there, because I know that's a very deeply unsatisfying answer. So for us in the UK, the way that the platform is structured is we tick all of the boxes that NHSE and most accrediting bodies have for what's referred to as simulated placement hours. So anyone who has those as part of their HEIs, this will obviously be who I'm talking to specifically with this is people in England who have the NHSE tariff system. They are able to claim back more than what SimConverse costs. So they basically have a cost neutral opportunity there. And that's being used by many hundreds of different learners, many hundreds of different educators, and heaps of different organisations across the UK to help support increasing placement hours. For everybody else, it is anywhere on the order of 10 to 30 times more cost effective than if you were to do this with a person, with an actor and an educator in the room. So there's some work coming out from the University of Nottingham about the cost effectiveness at large scale too. So that'll be really interesting. I'll scream that from the rooftops when it gets published. But it's cost effective is the through line, and it scales very well, which is the other thing.
If someone was interested and maybe wanted a little bit of a demo, is that available?
Yeah, absolutely. So typically the process that people will follow is they'll either want to reach out to me directly or reach out through our website. My email is will@simconverse.com, WILL at simconverse.com, SIMCONVERSE.com. So typically the process that we follow is then we'll jump into a meeting, have a bit of a conversation about what they're looking at, get them onto the platform so that they can try it in real time, get them to try a more interesting voice than Joe, and probably a more difficult conversation than Joe. I like putting people through their paces when they jump on. It's always entertaining for me. But yeah, that's usually the process that we follow. So I'm very happy for anyone to kind of reach out and have a chat. Also, I'm also a bit of an education theory nerd. So if they want to talk about stage-based learning, if they want to talk about sim theory in a way that the platform is used in that fashion, we haven't touched on it today, but I'm also a nerd in that domain. So I'm very happy to chat through all that stuff.
So I'll put all your contact information in the description. So if anybody wants to reach out to you. Well, that's all I've got for you, Will. Is there anything you'd like to add before we sign off?
No, that's it. Just thank you very much, Craig, for having me on. And I enjoyed the podcast. I'm looking forward to hopefully coming back in future. Yeah,
like you say, Will, I was very impressed when we went up to Aspie and I had got my hands on it. It blew me away. Well, thank you very much, Will. I know you're probably either ready for bed. Hopefully the weather is a lot nicer than it is over here at the moment. But yeah, thank you very much. Have a nice Christmas and a new year, and look forward to seeing you sometime again.
Brilliant. Thanks, Craig.
And that wraps up another episode of the SimTech podcast. A huge thank you to Will from SimConverse for joining me today and sharing such an incredible insight into how AI is shaping the future of clinical simulation. If you're interested in learning more about SimConverse, be sure to check out their website. I'll include the links in the episode description so you can explore their platform and see how it could enhance your simulation training. Don't forget to subscribe to the SimTech podcast so you never miss an episode. If you enjoyed today's discussion, I'd love to leave a review or share it with your colleagues. It really helps us grow and reach more people in the simulation community. Got any questions or ideas or suggestions about future episodes? Feel free to reach out to me directly. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time on the SimTech podcast. Until then, keep innovating and pushing the boundaries of simulation.